Thanks for joining me on Tropical Weather Impact on your Monday, August 4th. I'm meteorologist Peyton Malone. We're here in New Orleans as the tropics, well, they finally are waking up after a long sleep through the month of July here. The National Hurricane Center tracking 3 separate areas as of your Monday morning. Now, we have one named storm if you missed it. Last night, Tropical Storm Dexter formed off an old boundary or an old front. It did become tropical and now it's moving out to sea, so that's not going to be an issue. And a quick overview, we've got another area that's going to be watched, very similar setup to Dexter off the East Coast. Only thing, it's not going to go this way. It's maybe going to come inland here towards the Carolinas by the end of this week. And then another feature, tropical waves going to be rolling off the continent of Africa soon, and the Hurricane Center is giving that an even better shot of trying to develop probably towards the end of this week. And so outside of Dexter, nothing is going to happen very quickly over the next couple of days or so. This is going to be more of a later this week and into the weekend type of setup. Now here is the latest on Tropical Storm Dexter. It is a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Excuse me, a 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm. May see the winds pick up a little bit more, but this thing is staying out to sea. It's impacting no land areas. It's even going to stay north of Bermuda here. Probably have some rough seas at times, but that's going to be the extent of it as it moves northeast and eventually transitions from tropical to post-tropical as we head towards Wednesday and Thursday. Although it will still be a storm, it will just really no longer be tropical in nature once it reaches the northern parts of the central Atlantic. So Dexter will go down as well, probably not remembered as it remains out to sea. Now the other 2 areas, again, the National Hurricane Center seems to think this tropical wave is going to roll out over the Atlantic here over the next couple of days. I don't think it's going to do anything the next few, but once we get towards this weekend, it'll have a better shot of trying to organize somewhere in this area. And there's a lot of uncertainty with how far this one goes and where exactly it's going to go here. And we're going to dive into the steering currents and what's going to be a big influence on this down the road. But the one closer to home that needs to be monitored, especially for areas around the Carolinas and into Georgia, is this thing. And it is currently really not a whole lot of anything. It's still tied to this old frontal boundary. This is what Tropical Storm Dexter formed off of. So this setup is going to look similar in its formation. So what we're going to watch here is by the end of this week, we may see this come together, consolidate. You could have a depression. Now, they're only giving it a 30% chance of development where we stand right now, and that's really based on the confidence in the forecast. There is some uncertainty if anything actually does come together. Now, either way, this is going to be tropical moisture and some extra rain for the coastal areas and for areas around the Carolinas and down towards Georgia. Not going to see anything develop the next few days. We do think anything that happens is probably going to be towards Thursday, Friday, and into the upcoming weekend. Another thing, this is not going to be in a hurry to move, and so that means this could be a flood risk for those coastal areas. Also a rip current risk developing along the Carolinas, and not going to be good beach weather later on this week as this area of disturbed weather lingers in there. And so we're just going to watch this and see how things evolve. Now, something else you may notice, these big burst of showers and storms that is south of Bermuda, tropical moisture. That tropical moisture is also going to be traveling towards areas like the Bahamas and South Florida. That coupled with this frontal boundary, this is going to yield some heavier showers later on this week. So let's track the tropical moisture. You can see the leftover frontal boundary draped across the deep south and out here into the Atlantic. This, as we go through the remainder of the week, notice you start to see it consolidate some, just meandering off the coast as there's really not a whole lot steering it around at this point. As we get into Thursday and Friday, trying to see something consolidate. The southern side of this is that tropical moisture that's coming in from the south. And there, as we go into the end of the week here, maybe trying to see something organized before slowly pushing west-northwest. So whether something consolidates on the northern side of this outlook area or the southern side, that'll determine where we could see some of the heavier rain. But general thinking, if I'm in Wilmington, Charleston, Savannah, Jacksonville, anywhere along the west coast of east coast of Florida here, mainly north of Miami, I'm keeping a close eye on this feature to see how it evolves by the end of this week. But again, this is not going to happen quickly. This is this upcoming weekend. We're watching that tropical moisture finally move inland. Now here in New Orleans and Mobile and surrounding areas, I will say I wouldn't turn my back on this. I'm not really concerned with it, but there are some ensemble models and guidance that show maybe an area of low pressure forming a little bit further down to the south here associated with this tropical moisture. And so we'll keep an eye on that, make sure it doesn't try to sneak up on anybody. But right now the thinking is this is the better shot of actually seeing a little bit of formation by the end of this week. Looking at the ingredients for this, it's got warm water temperatures, not boiling water temperatures. It's not the Gulf after all, but you do have mid to low 80s. That's enough to support some development. And when you look at wind shear, you do have relatively low wind shear as we go through the end of the week here. And so that's why that development potential, it's certainly there. Now, again, I do think this is going to be a heavy rainmaker, and that's the main thing to watch out for at the end of the day. Where those exact high totals fall or how high they get, that's still yet to be determined. But there's that potential that you could see some really heavy tropical showers along the coastal areas from North Carolina, South Carolina, down into Georgia here, maybe even parts of Florida. You could see a fairly broad area of that tropical moisture across the deep south and down into Florida as we go through this week. So this is a 7-day total from one model run, but it shows the potential that there could certainly be some heavy tropical showers. So outside of that, we're just going to be watching for maybe that low pressure to come together. The other thing we're going to be monitoring more so long term is the tropical wave that's rolling off the continent of Africa. Now, at the moment, it's on the lower side of the Saharan dust. You've got a lot of Saharan dust on the northern side of it. So we'll see how that impacts it, and that's probably going to be fairly big hindrance for it in the near term. Now, when we go out in motion here and put it into Wednesday and Thursday, you can see the initial signs of models sniffing out this tropical wave tied up in this intertropical convergence zone. The GFS and the European model are in agreement that we start to see some disturbed weather trying to push into, well, where the National Hurricane Center is outlining that potential development. So this would again be towards the end of the week. And so we're going to be in a wait and watch phase with this for a big chunk of the week here. Let's go out in motion. You can see that the European model is less aggressive with it trying to form, whereas the GFS says, hey, this thing could easily be a named storm at some point by this weekend. Now also notice this is this coming Saturday. We're talking 5 to 7 days from now. This system, whether it's there or not, it's still going to be way out in the Atlantic. And so still no reason to be stressing about it big time here in the U.S. Meanwhile, see that little blob? That's what models are picking up on trying to spin up here off the East Coast and moving inland. But this little feature here, the one that's going to get a lot more capture on social media because it is occasionally spitting out a named storm, it's just a long ways out there to track it. And so we'll just have to see how things unfold as it's in those formative stages. Remember, there's nothing there right now, and models are trying to figure out what they want to do with it. Now, here's a telling thing. This is the GFS and the European models showing how far apart they are in the long term. So a week from today, the GFS shows a storm sitting just north of the Caribbean islands, whereas the European model shows a storm sitting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away from that, more so in the central Atlantic and pulling out to sea. And so obviously it matters if it's going to go out to sea or if it's going to stay on that southern track and come closer. The reason you have such a big model spread has to do with how the models are picking up on a trough and the ridge of high pressure. Now, when you look at the steering pattern into this weekend and early next week, you do have a fairly strong ridge sitting over the central and eastern Atlantic. Now, if that ridge is stronger, that keeps whatever's trying to form down here a little bit further south. And the question goes, well, does it stay trapped under that ridge? And then does it become a problem for the U.S. in like 10 to 14 days? And that's how long out we're going to be tracking this thing. Or does that trough linger? It's a little bit stronger, and maybe it gives an escape route for that system to travel out to sea. This is a very hard thing to determine this far, and I'll caution you, there's really no definite answer at this point. Those are just kind of our two wide scenarios that could play out here. And when you look at the guidance, when you look at the ensemble models, you do see a fairly clear split of some models thinking the ridge is stronger and you have a system maybe approaching the U.S. in 10 days or so, or the ridge is weaker and it curves out to sea. And so both of those scenarios are on the table right now. And I'll caution you, if you do look at the model runs, they're going to be flip-flopping around. They're really not reliable at this point. But pattern recognition, it'll be important. Now, what's interesting is that little trough is aided by what's left over from Dexter. And so you can see that that's Dexter right there. Notice the trough is, or the ridge is fairly weak by the Wednesday, Thursday time frame. But how much of the remnants of Dexter are left there and lingering in that area? And so it'll be interesting to see. Now, there's some other things. It's not solely relying on Dexter at this point, but that dip, how strong that trough is, you'll want it stronger. because you want this thing to go out to sea. If it ends up being weaker, it misses it, then you have something trapped under the ridge, and that's when you can have bigger problems here closer to the U.S. But again, this is so far out that it's really just to the point where it's worth the mention. Again, the tropical wave is just now coming off the continent of Africa. And when something is that far out, you're typically tracking this thing 10 to 14 days. And so it's not a fast process. It is agonizing watching it travel across the Atlantic. But at this point, we're just watching that with one eye. Now, this one closer to home, the East Coast does need to keep a closer eye on that. That feature trying to form into something by the end of this week. This feature also trying to form into something by the end of this week, but it's still way, way far out in the open waters of the Atlantic. So where we stand right now, we're just in August. This is not unusual to be tracking 3 separate areas. The development chances are somewhat marginal right now. We're just in that wait and watch phase, but it wouldn't be shocking if we are tracking a named storm in the next 7 to 10 days. And by the way, that tropical wave that's rolling off the continent of Africa is probably going to be the first of several over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And what'll be interesting, this tropical wave may end up being kind of a precursor for the other tropical waves. It may moisten up the atmosphere and give some tropical waves behind this one a better chance of developing. Models are showing at least that potential as we head into the middle of August. And again, that's not unusual as we head into the peak of hurricane season here over the next month or so. So that's where we stand with your tropical weather impact for your Monday. Nothing to get worked up over with right now, just some updates coming as we go through the week. Of course, we will have these every single day for you as we do track these tropical features across the Atlantic. We're heading into the heart of hurricane season. It's important to take a deep breath here and remember to get some reliable information. This time of year, you can find any model run on the internet that shows a hurricane hitting somewhere in your vicinity. Remember, most of the time that never happens, but got to be ready just in case, and we'll be here tracking it for you all. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.